Turn up the dive, feel the vibe, get ready to ignite. Untold stories in the airways, flying through the night. Experience voices, tales so bold. Streaming live, the truth unfolds. Untold Radio Network, where secrets come alive. New episodes daily, the mysteries thrive. Great guests, super chat, it's so I remember I. Share and subscribe, join the side where truth can't hide. Aliens in the attic, UFOs in the sky. Cryptids lurking, oh my, oh my. Ghosts in the hallway, whispering your name. The paranormal, the unexplained. Become a VIP, get the inside scoop. Unlock the mysteries, be part of the group. Live streaming stories, they're talking to you. Super chats buzzing, join the crew. Untold Radio Network, where secrets come alive. New episodes daily, the mysteries thrive. Great guests, super chat, it's a wild member ride. Share and subscribe, join the side where truth can hide. So if you've got the guts and you want to explore, tune into the Untold, it's what you're looking for. From aliens to ghosts and all that's unseen. Untold Radio Network, where the world's mysteries convene.
The paranormal, UFOs, monsters, mysteries. You're listening to Talking Weird. And now, from a cabin deep in the Northwoods, your host, Dr. Dean Bertram.
Greetings, all my fellow weirdos and weirdettes. Welcome to Talking Weird on the Untold Radio Network. I'm your host, Dean Bertram, and I'm delighted that those of you watching live have made the jump from Tuesday nights to Thursday nights with me at 9 p.m. Central, whether you're watching or listening on YouTube, Facebook, or X, or maybe you're watching the show archived on one of those platforms after we go live, now every Thursday at 9, or perhaps you're listening to the audio, which always drops the following day on any of the many podcast platforms where people download and listen to their podcasts. At any rate, greetings, welcome. Thank you for being here. I've had a hectic week. After the show last week, I had a weird, possible Bigfoot experience. And those of you who listen to the show regularly know I don't think Bigfoot's necessarily flesh and blood, but I have a weird story. I'll share it when we bring our guest on, though, because he knows far more about Bigfoot than I do. But also, my poor daughter this week, well, it's gone very well, which is fantastic. She had to have some corrective eye surgery, and it looks like it's done amazingly. Poor little thing's been lying in the dark, though, for the last few days. So those of you who pray, if you could pray for her to have a full recovery, I would be very much grateful, and I know she would certainly appreciate it as well. For those of you who haven't seen The Shaver Mystery yet and live anywhere near Winchester, Virginia, it's screening this weekend at the incredible Genre Blast Film Festival. For those of you who might be listening for the first time, The Shaver Mystery is a short standalone segment extracted from my upcoming feature documentary, The Man Who Invented Flying Saucers, and it is about probably one of the most fascinating tales in the history of the paranormal, and certainly the most controversial story in the history of science fiction. It's a 14-minute short documentary, which has done really well on the festival circuit. That's its next screening, which again is at Genre Blast at the Alamo Draft House in Winchester, Virginia, and I believe it plays in a 5:45 p.m. block of short films this Friday. So if you can get along and check that out, that would be absolutely amazing. And I was going to be going, but my daughter obviously is in no shape to be left alone or to come with me. Not that she'd be left alone, but I would have, had somebody watch her, but I need to take care of her. So I won't be there. I will be at the screening which follows that Genre Blast screening, though. That the next one is the weekend of September 19 to 20, which is taking place at the Crossing Realms conference in Missouri, and I think that's Richmond, Missouri. I will be there, and I will also be doing a presentation on later aspects of the Shaver mystery, which aren't talked about in that short documentary. I'll also be on panels. There's a bunch of incredible guests there, including my guest tonight. I'm just going to play a little teaser trailer for it, made by our very own Doug Hychek here at Untold Radio Network. He is, and the Untold Radio Network is one of the key sponsors of that event. And I would love you to come along. I know a lot of you are, and I can't wait to meet so many of you in person that I never have. Conferences are always incredible places to make lifelong friends because you're there mixing with people who share your interests that you mightn't share, or you mightn't get to, share these interests with most people in your day-to-day life. So I'll play the teaser and then I'll introduce our incredible guest.
Crossing Realms Conference is coming this September 19th and 20th to the Eagleton Civic Center in Richmond, Missouri. Tickets to this landmark event are on sale right now at Eventbrite. The powerful speaker lineup will cover topics from Bigfoot, UFOs, and aliens, so you will not want to miss attending this amazing 2-day inaugural event. Again, that's the Crossing Realms Conference, this September 19th and 20th at the Eagleton Civic Center in Richmond, Missouri. Please mark your calendar and get your tickets before they vanish. Space is limited.
That is going to be just an incredible weekend. And if you do come along, please come and hang out with me and talk to me, because I mightn't recognize your face, or you might or might not be somebody who regularly comments in the chat anyway. But regardless, come and say hi and hang out. I'm looking so forward to it. I'm particularly looking forward to meeting in person tonight's guest. As I mentioned, he'll be there. He's a successful media and YouTube personality with his channel Bigfoot Michigan Rob. He's the author of 2 books found on Amazon. Bigfoot Michigan Rob Presents True Cryptid Encounters, and there's a book 1 and a book 2 in that series. They're both fantastic, and we've talked about them at some length on the show before tonight. I'm sure we'll dip our feet into those waters again tonight when we talk about some of the incredible tales that our guest is familiar with. His shows are Beyond BMR, which plays Tuesday, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Brunch with Bigfoot Michigan Rob, Thursdays at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and Late Night, which is Saturday at midnight. What a fantastic time slot. He's one of a few people that has not only seen a Bigfoot, but has actually had it vocalized directly at both himself and his girlfriend one summer day back in 2018. This has led him down this rabbit hole of otherworldly beings, and he is a paranormal and a UFO experiencer to boot. He can be found on all social media platforms and podcast sites, so I'm delighted to welcome back to Talking Weird my good friend Rob Karnafel, aka Bigfoot Michigan Rob. Greetings.
Greetings, Dean. How are you?
Man, I'm good. I'm glad I get to talk to you tonight. It's been a little while. It's been almost a year since we had you on.
Yeah, I noticed that. I think you were on my show talking the Shaver mystery probably about a year or so ago.
And now we're going to hang out in person. In
yeah, thanks for the little introduction on the great conference, the 19th and 20th. I can't believe, Dean, we started promoting this back in December, literally, and it's less than 3 weeks away, and it's just going to be fantastic. We've got a total of 20 speakers and featured guests. We have and we're going to cover everything from UFOs, aliens, and cryptids. We're having a ghost hunt. There's also be a tour of a haunted location on the site. We're doing a pre-party at a haunted ranch on Thursday. And yeah, I can meet the whole gang, everybody I'm associated with, and yourself. And I'm just excited for it. We finally get to stop promoting it. And if this is a success, we're gonna have to start it all over in a couple of months, re-promoting, right? If it works out, like I suspect it will. We've got some pretty record sales I've noticed on Eventbrite.com. Go check out the Crossing Realms Conference on Eventbrite. You can buy your tickets there. They're still available up until the 19th. And actually, we'll take walk-ins as well.
And I have a link on the show notes already, and it will travel across wherever this
Excellent.
podcast goes to that Eventbrite site. So if people go in the show notes, they should just be able to click right through to it. And you guys have done an incredible job and a long lead in with the promotion of this. It's been phenomenal.
Thank
As
you.
somebody who's been running not paranormal conferences, but events and film festivals for the better part of 20 years, I'm so impressed with how you guys have handled this. It's just
Oh,
amazing.
yeah, it's kind of, well, I will say this, our first one, the team, myself, the Blondes and the Boo, that's Krista and Brandy, Tex, and a whole host of other ones. And, but I will say this, Krista really spearheaded this whole thing, and I'm learning a lot from her because she's actually been putting together conferences since she started her paranormal work some 20 years ago. Her and Brandy have been doing these things, so they had a pretty good idea, along with Monica Rawlings as well. I thank you for that. That was a great compliment because we were very serious about this and getting it out to the public. And like you said earlier, I just can't wait to meet more of the fascinating people that come on the shows. I'll be able to put their chat room name to their physical name. And I've been to this is like my fourth conference I've been to, and it seems like every year I go to one, I just learn more, meet more great people, like you said. It's informational. You'll learn something, but we also have a good time and get to meet the people that help drive our shows. Without our audience, we wouldn't be on the air.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I can't wait to meet so many people. And I literally, throughout the course of my life, have met at events people who've been ongoing friends. Friends that I'm still very close to, as well as people who've collaborated with me on various projects. And if it wasn't for film festivals and paranormal conferences, my social life, as well as my professional life, would be so much poorer. It's just there's such fantastic opportunities to network and to make lifelong friendships.
Oh yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because sure, I've got my one best friend that I met well before high school and we're still friends with, and I've got some college buddies, and of course the family, which is always great. But the folks that I've met in this field, this genre, whether it's cryptid, UFO, what have you, it's just some fantastic people. They're people that, the thing that I love most about it, even outside of my close friends, here personally, I've become friends with so many great people, and we all share this common bond, right? We all have like minds when it comes to these things, and nobody's closed-minded, and anything goes. The name of your show is Talking Weird, and people outside of our realm, if you will, think we're weirdos, right? But they just don't get it, and that's what we do.
And it's funny because when you bring up weirdness in general conversations, occasionally you'll find somebody who is interested and is switched on.
Yeah.
But for the most part, people don't want to be talking about Bigfoot or the Shaver mystery, or maybe they want to talk about in passing, you know what I mean? Or they might have said, well, my cousin once saw something, but they don't have an interest where, like if I went to the local bar here, I could talk about football all night long with everybody in that bar, right? But
Yes.
I brought up the Shaver mystery and I explained what it was.
Yeah,
Nobody would want to talk about that with me for an hour, but at a conference, people will talk about that crazy stuff with you for an hour or two.
At a conference, you sometimes have to remove yourself from some people because they will talk the entire show with you, one person, and you got to kind of, mingle with everybody else.
Right.
But it's funny. You know what I just started doing about 2 years ago because on my channel, I also put out my email address. If anybody has an encounter, like a lot of us do, Dean, if you got a weird story or encounter, send it to my email. I'll bring you on the show, or I'll just tell it or whatever. So I've been starting to, when I go grocery shopping, or if I'm standing in line at the gas station, if I see somebody that I suspect, and I don't know where I get this from, that might be interested, I'll just start a casual conversation, and they'll look at me kind of weird. One day, Dean, I just said, hey, let me ask you something. What do you think about this Bigfoot? What do you think about aliens? Some people will look at you and they'll kind of, run from you. But some people are like, yeah, why are you asking me? I said, well, because I have a show, and I talk about this stuff, and I'm panning for guests here at the mobile gas station. there's a lot of people, it's kind of an icebreaker, but you go to the bar and anybody can talk sports. But when you find that one person that's interested, I get a big kick out of that. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I guess in fairness, there has been a change in, I guess, the zeitgeist now. More people do seem interested, even in a passing capacity,
Yeah.
in the weird. But I think the type of people who listen to shows like mine or yours,
Yes.
they have a deeper interest, and you're only probably going to meet those type of people at conferences. That's in my
Yeah.
experience. I never bumped into anybody in just day-to-day life who's had a serious interest in this stuff enough to, have an interactive friendship where
I
conversations are constantly about.
No, you're right about that. See, my background started in sales, and I was always taught as a young guy when I got out of college and I broke into the sales world for a little while. The thing that always stuck with me is if you don't ask for the order, you're not going to make a sale. So I just kind of turned that around if I'm trying to pan the public for information, right? I'll ask, and yeah, it's kind of awkward, but I'm kind of used to that by now. And I've gotten a couple of nice stories from people. Now, of course, the people that follow us on our channels, they will sit for 2 hours and listen to a show. A lot of these other folks, they after about 20 minutes, they kind of lose interest and want to talk about something else.
Exactly. Maybe that might be a fun jumping off point, because I know we're gonna get into alien abduction and we're gonna get into Bigfoot,
Yeah.
and I'd love to play around with you and talk about how these things might be related, because that
Yeah.
fascinates me. But what's the most interesting story that you've received when you've just, like, talked to somebody at a gas station or, your local corner store or something, and you've been told a report? What
I
one stands out the most?
Well, one that does stand out the most is this was last summer. And again, I was actually at the mobile gas station, and I got there maybe it was early, like 8 or 9 in the morning, which is a lot, and it was during the weekday, and a lot of people are off rushing off to work, getting a coffee and gassing up their cars. But there was an unusually long line. I mean, there's like 20 people ahead of me. And so as I'm standing there, there was in front of me, there was a person that had on the back of his shirt, it says believe. But that was it. It didn't have any, there was no UFO. There was not a picture of a Bigfoot. It just said believe. So I'm thinking to myself, well, I got some time. So I kind of said, excuse me, to the guy in front of me. I said, where'd you get that t-shirt? It's kind of cool. Believe, what's that supposed to signify? It was, you wouldn't believe me if I told you. I said, well, I would, because if it has anything to do with paranormal or unknown phenomenon, that's what I do. And he goes, hey, can you step out of line with me for a minute? I go, yeah. So we stepped out of the gas station. We went outside. Again, it's the summertime. And so this man happened to be a construction worker. And that's what he did for a living. He remodeled homes, but his specialty was in kitchens and bathrooms. He says, okay. Then first we had some small talk, and I said, look, I have a YouTube channel. I do this and that. And I believe it or not, I've seen a Bigfoot in my lifetime, and some alien and some UFOs and things and ghosts. Holy cow, you've seen ghosts and paranormal. I go, yeah. He goes, well, I've never told anybody this. I'm going to run this by you and let me know what your thoughts are. Then he says, you got a minute? I go, yeah. Do you got a minute? You're not going to be late for work. He goes, nah, I'm self-employed. Okay, cool. So we're talking, and he says, okay. So he says, several months prior, he was on the job site, and he was remodeling a bathroom. And inside of this bathroom, it was a walk-in shower, and I guess it was pretty big. It was in a nice subdivision, so I imagine it was a very nice house. And the people that owned the home wanted him to put up a mural of the forest and so on and so forth. And they also wanted, in the back of the forest, they wanted depictions of forest animals like lions and tigers and such inside this guy's shower. So he was there, and he was finishing up a lot of his tile work, and he had right in the center of the mural of this tile, there was a lion face, and it was freshly he just freshly had finished it. And he was there with a couple of his other workers. And so he went on lunch break. And he's telling me, Rob, the strangest thing, I went to lunch. And he goes, I was only gone maybe 45, 50 minutes. Then I went back to the home, to the work site, back to finish up some more work in the bathroom. And then he says, when you look back at the tile mural, he said, Rob, I had to take a double look at this thing. He says, he goes, the strangest thing. And he goes, I do not know how this even occurred or how this happened. But he says the lion's head. And he goes on to tell me, I forget, Dean, how many tiles it took to put up the image of the lion. But I think if I remember, he's saying it was a sizable, maybe a 15 by 15 square, right? And he says, Rob, when I came back, the entire lion picture was upside down, reverted.
Good grief.
Yeah. And he says, now, this is not funny. At this point, he's like extremely mad. And he starts calling out to some of the workers, who in the heck did this? I mean, who did this? Look at this line. Who did this? But he said at the same time, Dean, there's no way it could have been done in that quick, in 45 minutes. And there was no residue of any of the cement or whatever you used to secure these tiles. It was very clean. And it was almost completely dry. And it shouldn't be dry. It usually takes about 48 hours, 24 hours to cure, right? But it was completely cemented into the back of this shower. And he literally had to go in and chisel out what he had put up. Now, he says the odd thing is that the surrounding tiles were still not cured. He could pull them out because they hadn't dried, except for the lion's head, turned upside down, inverted, I guess, or that's not, but whatever. And then the course to work said, boss, of course we didn't do that. Why? That's what we do for a livelihood. We work for you. Why would we create more work? Or that would be a terrible practical joke. But the bottom line is, whether that was meant to be a joke, he says, Rob, you cannot do that in 45 minutes when it took this man like 5 hours to do it correctly. You know what I mean? So that was just like one example. And there's a couple other ones, but I thought that Talking Weird befitting of your show, because I've gotten a lot of stories in my life. I've been doing this about 3 years, almost going on 4 years. That was very odd.
That is super duper weird. As Horace Smith, the professor emeritus of physics and astronomy at Michigan State University, just mentioned, it sounds like an M.R. James story, who's a famous ghost writer. It's such a weird tale. Weirdly, the house I grew up in, we didn't have any changes in the structure of the tiling, but your story reminded me of this. I think my mother, when she's guested on Talking Weird a couple of times when she visits over the holidays. I have her on.
Okay.
The audience really always love her. She might have told this story. If she didn't, I'll make sure she tells it this holidays when she visits from Australia.
Okay.
But the bathroom, well, in Australia, our bathroom and in the house I grew up in, our bathroom and our, I guess, toilet is what you'd call it in Australia, were two different rooms. Like with the room with the shower and the tub and, the vanity and everything else in was one room. And where the commode was in a different room. They were across the hall from each other, which was good. It meant somebody could have a shower and somebody could be using the potty and there wouldn't be any clashing. Anyway, the room which had the potty in it, or the commode or whatever, the porcelain, whatever you want to call it, right? There were a couple of tiles in that room that had faces that I think became progressively face-like during the period we lived there. They really bothered me when I was a kid. And why it's particularly strange is I remember this story, and my mother remembers it even clearer because she was older. My dad was certainly, he's passed now. He was certainly a very handy man, but he was in the Naval Reserves. He was an officer in the Naval Reserves, and he also did in his private business a lot of business overseas. So he was away a lot when I was a kid, which meant we had a handyman to do all the stuff that a father would normally do around the house on call when my dad wasn't there, right?
Yeah.
So a handyman was there doing our handyman, I guess, because I think he came more than a couple of times. He was there doing, I can't even remember what the job was. I think it had something to do with that room. And he said he was a psychic as well. And this is weird because he wasn't a professional psychic. He just had, the other sense or whatever, what would they,
Sure. Yeah.
the special sight or whatever people would call it in the olden days. He said there was somebody buried under our house.
Oh.
And he thought they were buried under where the bathroom was. And I often wonder and I'm somebody who's, somewhat skeptical and, has a different attitude to a lot of these things than people who are definitely believers in that type of stuff. But I do wonder if he was right and he picked up on some energy under the house. And I remember him telling this to my mother when I was a little kid and being like, this is creepy as all hell. And she remembers it very clearly because she was, already fully grown.
Right.
I was, I don't know, 8, 9, something like that. I often wonder if some energy from under the house had gradually come up and permeated those tiles.
Oh, man. Well,
it's creepy.
That is really creepy. And I can already tell we're getting sidetracked, Dean, as we always do, because this brings me to something eerily familiar or similar to what you just said. And I believe that was the case with the tiles. The tiles with the contractor I met, I think that was probably something certainly paranormal, but I didn't get into the depths of it. But I got a story from a person who they bought this older house in New England, of course, New England, where this is going already. And it was very old and they were going to remodel the home. And these contractors came out and they're milling about and doing some work. And they hadn't yet to get to tearing out the flooring. Then one night, this couple's they're living now in their home as work's being done. It's livable. They, a lot of the house was already fixed up. And one night, while this couple was laying in bed, Rob, this guy's telling me, I got an apparition appeared to my wife and I in bed, transparent. It was an older gentleman. And he said, take the bones. And it didn't verbalize this. He says it was almost a telepathic speech that him and the wife both heard. Said, take the bones to the ocean. And this couple was totally freaked out about this. And they did not make heads or clues. They seen this apparition in their bedroom. They both heard this telepathic communication. And then they got to thinking, wow, and then they said, well, we live in New England. They started doing some research. And yes, of course, it was in an area during the Salem witch trials as part of the property, this, that, and the other. But this is a man presence of the ghosts, not a witch. And they thought that maybe while the construction was going on, something was unearthed. Maybe the energy was released from all this construction work. They don't know. They're novices. They have nothing. They know nothing about ghosts or the paranormal. So, but they found it very odd about take the bones to the ocean. They couldn't quite figure that out. So, more construction is being done now. As I made mention, the contractors came back and they started working on the flooring in the basement of this home. And as they're tearing apart the cement or whatever the foundation of this floor was, they're ripping it apart. And they came across, as they're digging into this and removed everything, they stumbled across some old human-like bones buried beneath the cement in the basement.
Good grief.
And the couple says, we didn't know what to do. Take it to the police. Missing person. We have no idea. Has this been here for centuries? We have no idea. They were kind of scared. So the contractor, they said he got a very creepy and creeped out vibe, and the work crew got very nervous about this entire situation. So the contractors, what do you want me to do? Put them back in the ground or what? And this young couple, I guess, well, they're either maybe middle, maybe in their 40s, I guess, kind of young, I guess. So they didn't know what to do. They said no, but the thing was, the contractor quit the job that day, and they didn't come back. They had to get another contractor. That's how bad. That's how freaked out they were.
Whoa.
So, so this couple, I personally, if it was you or I, Dean, I think I probably would have called the police, just because that's what I think I would have done. But for whatever the reason, the wife goes to the husband. You know, that ghost that we saw not too long ago, or whatever the hell that was, honey, mentioned about take the bones to the ocean. So reluctantly, they take the bones from their basement, right? And they put it in like a some sort of satchel or whatever it was, Dean. And being they were not far from the Atlantic Ocean, of course, being New England, drove out to the coast, and they put this bag into the ocean. And the bag, they watched it kind of, this wave, the current kind of swept it out, and they didn't know how they felt about that. They felt like they did something wrong because not going to the police, this, that, or the other. So about a month goes by, and they're in their bedroom sleeping, and guess what appears? It is that same ghost-like apparition, and once again telepathically communicates, but all it says was this: "Thank you."
Wow.
And that was, I found that to be very intriguing.
Good grief.
You know,
What an experience. I often wonder now because I think that house, my childhood home, unfortunately, I think it's gone and it's been developed now. My mother doesn't live there anymore. She moved some time ago. I wonder if when it got bulldozed, if anybody found anything, or whether it was just bulldozed so much nobody, it wasn't even examined, possibly.
yeah. It's a strange world. I mean, you just come across these things, and I'm so fortunate to get some of these stories from folks because you just can't make stuff like that up. I mean, that is like, but the thing is, though, if you do this long enough, you've been doing this for a while. A lot of these, we were talked earlier, a lot of these commonalities, whether it's the spirit world, the cryptid world, UFO world, a lot of these things are common. And a lot of these same traits that we hear in different stories, it does not depend on the genre. They all have common elements, right? For data. I can refer back to this, and this for these other 8 stories that I heard, or maybe heard on another podcast, right? And people just aren't sitting there spending 80 hours a week memorizing podcasts to come up with this stuff. Yeah, that's a good question. I just I wonder whose bones those were. Well, they never investigated. I guess that's the last I heard from them. But you know what I mean, though. It's all, to me, it's a big mystery, and I think there is that connection with all this stuff.
Yeah, I do think and that's something I definitely want to get into with you rather. But maybe before we do,
Yeah.
you were going to tell me about an alien abduction
Yeah,
experience.
I knew you'd probably like this. I know it's right up your alley. I talked to this lady about a year ago and did not want to come on the show. In fact, I found this story so compelling that I had already written my second book, and I had to, before I put it to publication, I had to edit it, and I had to get this story in there because it would have been a perfect story for the end of the book, and I just couldn't wait to get it out there to the public. And this was a young lady who went on to tell me that ever since she was 5 years old, she started having these nightmares as a child. And these nightmares, of course, I'm talking to her, and as an adult, we talked on the phone and via email and all this. And these nightmares was always out of these dark alien grays. And she said dark alien grays, not like the ones you see in the movies, but they weren't quite gray, but they were like a darker shade with the big almond-shaped eyes. And as a young child, she would just see them in her dreams. And they were just kind of, she says, Rob, they were always just kind of observing me in these dreams. But as a young kid at 5 years old, she would just wake up screaming and crying and running to her mom and dad. Mommy, daddy, I'm having, I'm being, I don't know what's going on. And of course, the parents being like most parents, honey, you're just having a bad nightmare and a bad dream. Well, these dreams continue to go on for this young lady throughout life into adolescence. And then they really starting to heighten right around the age of 16. And at the age of 16, she said, Rob, these dreams were not just about these alien grays observing me. Now, in these dreams, they became more vivid. They became almost like she wasn't dreaming of it, but she was actually there. And she says, from the age of 16 on until about the age of 30, she would have these same continuous dreams every 3 or 4 months. And the dream would always go like this. She would be laying on a gurney. She could feel cold on her back. She was in a surgical gown with her backside exposed. And she says, Rob, there was these 3 alien grays surrounded me on this table. And she said that the table was very bright. The room was very bright. And she got the feeling that she wasn't in a dream, but yet she was on some sort of spacecraft. She goes, I don't know why I got that vibe, but I just felt that I was somewhere else, not on this planet. And these 3 grays would be staring at her. And the one at the end always had this surgical apparatus in his hand. And she did a great job describing all the features of these creatures, these alien grays, as she says. And she always noticed that it would be going into her private area, okay? And she would get these off and on throughout the years, again, from like 16 to 30. Right around the age of 25, she had gotten married, had 2 beautiful daughters, as she goes on to explain, and her husband. And right after she had her very own children, these nightmares grew even worse. And they got more vivid. And it happened more, these happened more frequently. It got to the point where she thought she was going insane. And unfortunately, it caused a divorce in her family. Husband left her. And the 2 daughters didn't stand by their mom. They stand by their dad. And they went separate ways, right? And she never sees the ex-husband and rarely sees her daughters. So kind of sad, right? So one night she's in her bedroom, but prior to this, she says, Rob, also right around the age of 24, 25, right when I was pregnant, there were these 12 nodes or nodules that were on the back of her neck that she could feel. She counted like up to 12 of them. And she would she was worried she had cancer, went to several different doctors, and they didn't know quite what they were. They took samples from the back of her neck on these nodes or these nodules, ran biopsies, didn't find any cancer or anything that could harm her. But these doctors couldn't tell her what it was. They couldn't give her a diagnosis on any of this. So now she has this going on, divorced, lost her kids. She thinks she's going nuts. These dreams are getting worse and worse and worse. One night, she's laying in her bed, and at the edge of her bed, she goes, now she's not in the typical dream where she thinks she's on this craft being operated on. She's actually in her bedroom sleeping, and she's awake, and all of a sudden, at the foot of her bed is a single alien gray. It appears in her bedroom, and it's looking at her. Telepathically, it speaks to her and says, we've been taking you. This is all telepathic now in her bedroom. We've been taking you these years using your womb as a incubation center. Something of those words. I don't remember directly. Okay. Incubation center or whatever. I don't think center was the word, but regardless. And it also said that you also have bore us alien hybrid children. Before it leaves, it says you will meet one day. And it vanished. She goes, Rob, I didn't wake up because I was fully awake. It was not a dream. Now she fully thinks she's full, gone bonkers, mad, crazy, right? And she's a mess. She goes, sees a psychiatrist, tells her about her life story ever since she was a young girl. Hard to hold on jobs now, this, that, and the other. And the psychiatrist, again, can't figure it out. They still talked about the nodes, the nodules. At any rate, a couple of years go by, Dean, and the nightmares stop. Everything stops. But she still remembers about you'll be being paid a visit by one of your hybrid children. She's in a restaurant 2 years later or so, and she's eating dinner by herself. And she looks over across the dinner, the restaurant, I should say, and she says, Rob, I see this gorgeous, beautiful blonde girl. I swear, she says, it could have looked like one of my daughters. But she says she was so beautiful, it was almost like it was artwork. Her skin glistened, big, beautiful blue eyes, fair skin, long blonde hair. And then she's had this, and all of a sudden in her mind, what's in her mind is, oh my gosh, is this my daughter? Because she's got this vibe, right? She got this feeling. So this young lady, this beautiful girl, gets up and goes into the bathroom. So the woman in the story, she gets up to follow her into the bathroom. She waits, goes into the bathroom, and she sees this girl slip into a far stall on the end to do her business or whatever, right? So this woman is waiting in the bathroom. She goes, Rob, about 5 or 6 minutes goes by and she still hasn't emerged from the stall. She goes, well, I don't want to be rude or be weird, but she went to the end of the stall, looked underneath the stall to see if, for some reason, to see if she was there. She didn't see any feet. There was nothing in there. And she kind of reluctantly puts her hand on the stall. It's not locked, pushes it open. There's nobody in there. She gets out of the bathroom, rushes back to her sitting area in the restaurant, and looks immediately toward where this young lady was sitting. And the placemats, the whole sitting area was all cleaned up, like nobody was there. A new set of silverware was sat down, everything. She runs out into the parking lot, looking around for this woman, can't find her. The very next night, she goes back home. And guess what happens? That same alien gray pays her a visit. Again, when she tells me this, she goes, Rob, I know I'm awake, but how can I be? I think I'm having just a very lucid dream. You were paid a visit by your daughter. And then it says to her telepathically, and you're going to meet her tonight while you sleep. And then it disappears. The telepathy goes away. He's like, what is going now? She's really like beside herself, Dean. I can't explain the emotion this woman's going through. How can I fall asleep? Well, sure enough, she falls asleep, and guess where she ends up, where she hasn't been in many years? She's in that same gurney, laying down, the same 3 gray aliens in that familiar surrounding. However, the one alien does not have the apparatus on him that he was working on this woman. And all of a sudden, fading from the walls, approaches that beautiful woman that she'd seen at the restaurant. And this woman, not telepathy or not through telepathy, I can never say that word, speaks to her and says, I'm your daughter. we've taken what we've taken. And then she goes on to explain to this woman, by the way, the 12 nodules or nodes that you feel on the back of your neck, they were your 12 children, of which I'm the only one that survived. And slowly her daughter, hybrid daughter, faded away and she woke up back in her bed.
Good grief.
That's hard. I mean, that story, Dean, has all these elements. Every time I tell, it's heart-wrenching and it's very sad, man. And and are people delusional? I mean, I hear, I don't know. I every time I tell that story, which is not too often, I just feel so bad for this woman, what she's been through.
It's interesting when you talked about the 12 nodules on the back of her neck. And we're talking tonight, or we're planning on talking tonight, about comparative cases between different, paranormal or anomalous phenomena. Last night on the Untold Radio Network, Joshua Cutchin, who's a very good friend of mine and perhaps one of the greatest thinkers, not perhaps, he is one of the greatest thinkers in the Fortean space today, was a guest on Doug Hychek's show.
Okay.
And he was talking about the commonality between people who've been implanted, and we're getting to why this is related to your story, implanted with supposedly alien implants, and a correlate within the older fairy faith tradition of Ireland. And there's something which is known as a fairy blast. And the word blast comes from the same Indo-European root word as the word blister. And so this woman you're talking about has the 12 nodules or 12 blisters on the back of her neck. People who encounter the fairies often get hit with elf shot, or they get hit with what's called a fairy blast. And they, like an alien abductee, often have strange, unaccounted for particles lodged under their skin. So it's interesting that this woman has blisters or nodules on the back of her neck, because it also, I think the root word also talks about, in the Greek, it's a similar, because obviously the Proto-Indo-European stuff went, everywhere. The Greek word, I think, also does include the idea of round or ball. So a nodule is essentially round, ball, blister, blast. All of these things are related. And that people in both the fairy tradition and people in the alien abduction tradition often are hit by a blast or have a blister or have some unaccountable for objects under their skin. You see a similar thing in the witchcraft, and often a lot of people would say mania or hysteria of the Middle Ages, where witches often supposedly were left marked by their encounters with demons or by their encounters with the devil. I think, is my image frozen there for you?
Your image is frozen, but I can hear you.
Okay. Well. Maybe you can tell me what you think of that. I'm just gonna remove myself and then re-add me, and hopefully it will fix it. But what's your take on that, Rob?
I think. Well, first of all, I think that the fairy, the fae, I think a lot of that has a lot of relation to a lot of things that we talk about now. The nodules in that, and also really quickly, Dean, what Dean was mentioning about the demons, because a lot of people suggest that people aren't even being abducted by aliens, but they're being visited by demons, right? I don't know that. I think there's a distinct difference. Me personally, I think aliens are separate. Extraterrestrials and these grays to me are separate from aliens. I think from demons. I think that's a separate thing. I believe that the demons are the spawn of the devil, right? That's my take on it. Some suggest that aliens are demons, or that grays are demons. I don't know, you guys. That's just my thought on that. Everybody's variety of opinions. But also, though, when you talk about those blisters or nodules on the back of the woman's neck, have you guys ever heard about these alien abductees that have these metal put in their skin, and they actually have a doctor surgically remove it because it was implanted. I don't know, for whatever the reason is. Um, and they can never specify what it is, and they cannot have, like this lady, they cannot diagnose it. I found it strange that these nodes or these modules could be diagnosed by many doctors. And again, in this story, there's a lot more description in it. She visited many different doctors to when they did the biopsies to figure out what there was. And I don't know if you could hear me, Dean. I don't know that.
I could hear.
I think that, to kind of make any sense, the fairy and the fae, I believe in. My thing is, I don't know if they're demons, right? You believe that the alien? I just told the folks in chat or listening that I believe aliens are separate. I think they're extraterrestrials, other living beings from other worlds, and where the demon is a spawn of the devil, the disciple. So I think they're two distinct things. I know our buddy Jason thinks otherwise. But then you bring up the fairy and the fae, which totally throws me, because looking back, a lot of these fae can be very tormenting of human beings as well, right?
There's reproduction similarities as well, which is weird. Like anybody who dips into fairy lore
Mm-hmm.
can't help but find accounts of people who have relations with the fair folk, the other crowd, the she, the fairies,
Yeah.
and have relations sometimes resulting in offspring. Like there's a genetic element, there's a sexual element to both the alien abduction narrative and to the fairy narrative. There's lots of commonalities.
Mm-hmm.
There's obviously also missing time, although I'm reluctant to talk about missing time and do that comparison, because missing time in the alien abduction phenomenon is usually people forget what happened for 2 hours. While the time distortion in fairy faith is often somebody visits the fairies and then comes back and 6 weeks have passed, or 6 months have passed, or 6 years have passed. But there's still that commonality with time distortion,
Mm.
or a difference in what happened in the real world to the time that happened in the other space, the space when you were with the ETs or when you were with the fairies. There's lots of very strange commonalities. And obviously, again, Joshua Cutchin's written about this, before him, John Keel and Jacques Vallée and Patrick Harper. There's been so many people who've noted the similarities, not to even mention the fact that when we often think of the fair folk, we think of them as diminutive in size, which isn't always the case, because there's plenty of tales in the old fairy lore where they're exactly the same size as us, but there are also tales where they're smaller. And perhaps it's the same in ET lore. There's also tales where the ETs are our height or taller, but most of us, when we think about an extraterrestrial, we think of a diminutive humanoid. The same way most of us, when we think of the fair folk or the fairies, think of a diminutive humanoid.
Yes. And I've also heard that too. But once I met Monica a couple years ago, she's big into, that's one of her upper alley. She studies this a lot. And the fairy folk, they can be like a Tinkerbell. I always thought like Tinkerbell, but they can be as big as 20 feet tall in some
Yeah.
cases.
So can aliens, though. There are stories in Russia and south of the border where these ETs are all kinds of weird. Even the Flatwoods Monster story in America, like the Flatwood Monster, I don't think he was 20 feet tall, but he was certainly taller than human beings, right? So we even have that here in America, tales of these taller things, the tall whites in those stories from who's the author of the Tall Whites book. Anyway, so yeah, that carries through too. The fact that they're humanoid, but they're not us. They can look like us, but like the story that you told about the lady who encountered potentially her daughter, that she was this very fair, gorgeous looking creature, that fits in too with some of these interpretations from older fairy traditions, that they can be, almost phenomenally beautiful in their appearance.
It was funny when she was talking to this woman, because I spoke with this woman. I mean, that story's, I did it in 12 minutes, but there's so much more detail to that, and I just like to shorten it when I go to tell it. Otherwise, we still be talking about it. But what
Of
I love about it is she kept mentioning the alien grays, but she said they were darker, at least in her dreams. But then the more I looked into some of these things and trying to help this woman, because I'm no ufologist, but I found the Nordics are supposed to be a beautiful alien species, and I'm thinking that, I mean, I'm just talking off the cuff here. I don't know, maybe that his daughter was a hybrid Nordic, but I don't think then we're going, I just don't know, right? But for this woman to be so beautiful and so just breathtaking, and yet she's on a spacecraft with alien grays, to me, it didn't really make that much sense. If you kind of, it seems like she would look different, more alien. If
I
that
mean,
makes even any sense to you, I don't know.
well, it's interesting because, of course, again, in fairy tradition, there are things which are that's like we hear about hobgoblins, they're hideous creatures, or a beautiful fairy maiden who seduces a prince or something, right? There's this big there's this wide range of diversity within the description of these creatures in fairy faith, just like there's a wide range of diversity in the history of supposedly extraterrestrials. I'm putting air quotes or parentheses around it for anybody who is only listening, and perhaps this gives us more. Maybe there's a clue there for us. Perhaps there isn't that there's 100 different ET species or 100 different fair folk species. Maybe these things present themselves differently to us according to the need of the moment, or according to what our expectations are, or according to how they want to present.
Yes. You know, I'd like to share some with you. I don't know how much time we have. We have a little bit. I can probably
We still have to hit Bigfoot a little bit as well, by the way. So
well, we can, okay. Well,
that
this
share
kind,
that first, and then we'll hit
okay,
Bigfoot.
so this kind of, I don't know if this would be faithful legend or part of the elementals, because as we're talking about this, there's this man that was walking through the forest, very familiar forest, right, Dean? It was I forget the location, but he had been hunting, fishing here for 20 years, knows this place like the back of his hand. And he also camped along the side of this long river that ran along his camping area for about 20 miles. So he says one night, or one morning, he is up walking the trail down along the riverside. And then he all of a sudden noticed this very unusual trail that was forged out, that he was, to him, unfamiliar. So he says, Rob, so I'm like, I want to explore this. He checks it out. He's walking down this trail, and he says he's 5-6 minutes into this trail. And all of a sudden, the environment, the terrain, everything changed immediately. The trees, if they were pine, they turned to oak. If they were birch, they turned to fir. It was, everything just changed. The river, didn't notice the river to his right, didn't hear the water running. And he's getting very spooked out. And now he realizes that he's lost. Now, I have to tell you, this man prior to this knows nothing about portals, knows nothing about Bigfoot, alien. I mean, he's just a man out about the woods. But now he's scared. Now he realizes he's lost. He doesn't know how he got where he got. Everything is unfamiliar and foreign to him, very alien. So he sits on he finds this stump. He sits on this stump. And then all of a sudden he heard from the tree line, he looks and sees this big shadow. He goes, Rob, this shadow was maybe 10 feet tall, and it looked like a big, huge human being, but it was very wide, very tall. And he explains to me that it had a shape of like a conical head and such. And I'm asking this guy, do you know what Bigfoot is? Yeah, I've heard of Bigfoot, but during this time period, no, I didn't even pay it no mind. But he sees this shadow. Now, this shadow was kind of parallel. This man walks up and starts walking. So this shadow from the tree line is kind of paralleling him. But then it kind of disappears. As this shadow disappears, he notices the big trees at the base of these trees, Dean, they took on weird faces, emerged from the wood. Okay, the bark turned into faces, lifelike. Once again, this guy beside himself, he doesn't know whether to be scared or what. He just does not understand. But there was something inside him said just to continue on, because these faces continued on. As he's walking down the path, he started to follow the faces because something told him that was his way out. He don't know why. To this day, he has no why. But although being scared, he follows. He keeps following these faces. They're appearing different, and they're different looks about them. They're not all the same. They're different. Then all of a sudden, the faces all of a sudden faded away, and he says that big image, that shadowy big image appears for just a few seconds. It disappears. Then all of a sudden, he's getting ready to go around a bend, and he hears the rushing of water. And then all of a sudden, he's back in his familiar area. He's walking back on his original trail. Yes, the river's there, the trees, the terrain is back to what it's supposed to be, and he continues on back to his campsite. That you guys listening, Dean, that's got all they've got. You can tell. I mean, that's a short story, but boy, you can wrap a lot into that.
It fits into older, I suppose, folkloric and artistic traditions, like the Green Man or the foliate head in English artwork is this kind of often wood carved head surrounded by leaves, which as soon as you started talking about that made me think about that as well. And I think, and I mean, I haven't read on it for years, but I suspect there might be talk about the Green Man being tied with wild man traditions as well, which then brings it into Bigfoot traditions. So
Yeah.
these things, there's always this weird interrelationship, and the fact you said it had a conical head was how he thought this.
Yeah,
Which
that's what he
obviously
said. He
goes to the Bigfoot
says,
realm.
yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah, he said it was 8-9 foot tall, very tall. And he mentions conical head, and then I remember asking this man. I says, "You know about Bigfoot?" He goes, "Today I do, but back in the day, not particularly. I mean, everybody's heard of Bigfoot, but
Right.
again, my neighbor's heard of Bigfoot. Does he know what it is? No. Do I know what it is? No. I mean, frankly, we think we know, but anyway, he mentioned the size, the shape, so it fits the description. And then, so to me, I'm thinking, was that a dimensional Bigfoot? Was he working in relation with the elementals of the forest? The elementals is what your earth, wind, fire, water, I believe it is. Is that the 4 elements? But I didn't know that the elementals can take on a form. So maybe that wasn't elementals, and maybe it's reflecting back to what you were talking about, or maybe it was another element of the fae or the fairy folk, right?
Absolutely. I do think all of these things are interconnected, including Bigfoot. And I mentioned Joshua Cutchin, who was on Doug's show last night, the flagship Untold radio show of this network. And Cutchin wrote a book or 2 books actually, with Timothy Renner, Where the Footprints End. And in those books, they make comparisons between fairy traditions and fairy behavior with Bigfoot behavior. So this ties us back to the commonalities, perhaps with alien abduction. And so there's all kinds of weird connections. One of those is that the fairies have been known to supposedly braid the manes of horses at night.
Yes.
And there's been cases of Bigfoot supposedly braiding the manes of horses.
I've heard that as well. No stories on that, but I've definitely heard people speak on that before. And I think actually, I guess, Dean, is quite common.
It's bizarre.
And
And then what do you think? What do you think, just quickly, Rob, because
Yeah.
I didn't mean to step on you, but
No,
what
you're
do you
fine.
think about reports of Bigfoot being sometimes not only seen in the vicinity of UFOs, but even exiting UFOs? Like, I know Stan Gordon in Pennsylvania did a lot of work on this back in encounters that he was having reported to him back in the 70s, when a lot of this stuff seemed a lot weirder, to be honest. But there does seem to be a Bigfoot and a UFO connection. And obviously, if you take a very physical approach, and I've heard some people say this, well, the UFO people are dropping off Bigfoots. Do you know what I mean? But to me, it might indicate that there's a different correlation. There's a deeper, weirder correlation. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, if any.
I do have thoughts. I think that I think again, not to be redundant, I think all these things are related. And I always thought, okay, far fetched, that a UFO is dropping off a Bigfoot. But I just had Ron Moorhead on the show, maybe it was last year, and he was telling me back when he was younger, in his 20s, 30s, he says, Rob, if you would have met me back then and suggested anything alien or paranormal about the Bigfoot, I would have told you to go home. I'm not talking to you. But some 40 years later, or however long it's been for Ron, he's done a complete 360, right? 180, because he believes that Bigfoot could very well be alien, a form of alien. Then I had asked him, well, you think they're being dropped out of UFOs? He goes, I don't know anything's possible. It does seem far fetched, but you just don't know. Of course, the Sierra Sounds, he thinks were physical creatures, right? When he was back in the day. But again, that's why I like doing and talking to so many different people just for these data points. Because really briefly, I won't spend too much time with this one. This was in the Uinta Basin, not too far from the Skinwalker Ranch, right? And his family was set up just outside of Skinwalker Ranch, where the ranch was, and they had, and in the background there's a beautiful mountain ridge, and of course their yard backed up to a wood line, to the forest, and they love this place. And every night they were saying that in the mountain ridge there was always this brilliant light show, and it was many different colors. Hello, Melissa. Hello to, by the way, hello to everybody in chat. I'm not reading chat because I can't read the chat unless Dean does that. So I'm not being rude. Hi, thanks for coming on in. Anyway, so in the background, this brilliant light show, and Dean, he described it as not UFOs, but just like different shapes and sizes, some square objects, round objects, triangular objects, and they were brilliant, beautiful, dancing at the top of the mountain ridge. Very beautiful. And all of a sudden, as the weeks went on, they noticed that this light show, if you will, was getting closer to their home. And now it's almost to the tree line. And now this light show from up close is a lot bigger. And in fact, Dean, it would light up, and everyone listening, it would light up their whole backyard to an extent. It's so much to the extent that the closest neighbor, about 50 yards over, came running over to their house watching this light show. And they were mesmerized by this, as they're going on to tell me. Then all of a sudden, this light show, all these orbs, a variety of different orbs, I'm calling them orbs, the circles, the triangles, they all merged together, and they went back closer into the edge of the tree line, and they formed one oval shape. The oval shape all of a sudden dissipated, and then when it dissipated, there was a blast of light. And at the blast of light at the edge of this property, there was all these weird creatures, Dean, running around. And they thought they were like deer and elk and things of that nature. I don't think elk's in Utah, Uinta Basin, whatever they were, right, are running around. And so they can't make out what they were, and they start getting closer. And then it said it was the weirdest thing because they looked like horses with human-like heads on them.
Good grief.
Right? And it was very alien looking to them. And they said they even mentioned that there was just and then the beautiful light show where they had these great their experiences in their mind was just beautiful. But once this object turned into one and disappeared and dropped off these and they said there's lots of these little creatures, some big, some little, all running around. Then they had this ominous feeling. And they said that the mysterious thing was this, toward the end of watching this, and they're getting scared, there was this rain cloud, like a purple rain cloud, as he says, that rolled down close to the top of the property, and it starts raining. And after the rain was gone, all of the animals and all these things was gone, completely gone, and vanished from the property. But he says the weird thing is when he later that day, when he went out to the property line, about a 50-yard burnt, the ground was all singed and burnt, like something very hot landed there.
Wow.
So it had nothing to do with Bigfoot, but it happened to do with,
Well, it shows all different strange. I'm
Yeah.
always fascinated with cases that sound so wacky they can't be real, because I think they're more likely, and I think John Keel said something similar, the super high strangeness cases. If someone's going to BS you about a case, they're going to follow a pattern and probably tell you something fairly mundane. I saw a saucer, there were a little gray man, or I saw a
Yeah.
hairy man running through the woods, or
Yeah.
whatever. But these super weird cases, who on earth would invent something which sounds so wacky that 99% of people are just going to dismiss it?
Yeah, no, I think I have that same thought process. And also, too, the thing about it is I always tell people on my show, I don't care what your story is, send it to me and I'll air it. You can come on the show or I can tell it on my show. I don't care. Because I was there one time. I thought my encounter was wacky as heck, Dean. Mine was like, who believes my story? Well, guess what? It happened to me, and you can't take it from me, right? So that's how I approach folks. But you're right. And these people aren't getting 15 minutes of fame. Their names, I mean, they're on, it's anonymous. I'm not telling you anyone's name. They're not showing their face on a show. They're not getting proceeds from a book. I'm not paying them a dime. They, at their own free will, are sending me these stories to read. Now, if you're that bored with your life to make a wacky story to send to a stranger who's going to recite it to other strangers, then yeah, I guess you got a problem. I can't see people doing that.
I have to tell you a story quickly, because I'm not somebody who has regular paranormal or experiences, and I think it's all kind of paranormal. I think all of this
Sure.
stuff's interconnected to some capacity or other. But anybody who listens to the show regularly, and people who know me well, like you, understand that I tend to interpret Bigfoot as not a flesh and blood hominid, or not,
Yeah.
some relict ape man, or not
Right.
some, undiscovered North American ape. I tend to think that all of this stuff's interconnected. I had a very strange experience last Tuesday night, when that was the last episode of Talking Weird being on a Tuesday before we moved to the Thursday. My wonderful girlfriend was here with me, and after the show, she was out on my porch, because it's beautiful out there in the evening, particularly in the summertime. And I went out there, and I hadn't been out there for long. I don't think I've even been out there for a minute or two. And I was talking to her, and then we heard, and Samantha's, I think, is in the chat now. She might even be listening to this. We heard something I've never heard here. I've lived here now for, 8 years, maybe a little more, close to
I'm
9
sorry,
years.
and you're in the woods too, Dean? Are you
I'm
close
in the
by to
woods, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm in an area of Wisconsin which has a lot of woods, also a lot of farmland,
Okay. Yeah.
and it's super rural. Like the closest town to me, which is even, almost a 10-minute drive, has a population of, I don't know, less than 1,000 people, maybe 800 people. So
Okay.
I'm fairly remote. And we're just, we've been out on that porch many times, because we like to hang out there. And there is this growling noise, either coming from my front woods. Most of my woods are behind me, behind
Yeah.
my house, but either I have woods in the front as well, either from my front woods or from across the road, where there's, I guess, a kind of a pasture and more woods around it, then it goes into thicker woods again.
Mhm.
And it was a growl I couldn't identify. And she's lived in Wisconsin her whole life, and she's a hunter. She's, grew up
Yeah.
in a
Okay.
rural area as well. So she's not some city girl. She's like, I have no idea what that is. And we're listening to this thing growling like a loud, weird, freaking growl, right? Nothing that I mean, I'm not from here, but I've never heard anything like it before.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and I jokingly say to her, that's a freaking squatch or something.
Hey,
And then
Wisconsin could be the beast of Bray Road.
it could be Dogman. And anyway, this thing's it's super weird. Like, it sounds really big, like big too. It doesn't sound like a dog growling. I mean, I've had dogs. There's dogs, and I know dogs, right? It's some weird growl I can't identify. And then I step off because I want to go closer to it, because I mean, that's the instinct. What is this noise? And we'd already listened to it for it just kept growling on and off for like, I don't know, well over 30 seconds to a minute.
Oh, wow.
And I step off my porch to go towards the sound, and it stops. And I'm like, it obviously, could see or hear. And I'm like, I'm going to give it a freaking whoop, because I sometimes do that to be funny,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, right.
She's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
do it. And I do my best Sasquatch whoop, right?
Yeah.
And guess what we hear back? I'm not kidding you. And we
A
were
whoop. The whoop.
no, a freaking tree knock.
Oh boy. Okay.
It was the weirdest thing. Like, we still talk about it. I mean, admittedly, it was only a few days ago, but when she was hanging out on the weekend again, we were talking about it. And if you're in the chat, Sam, feel free to say something about it. But it was super weird. Like, I still don't know what the heck that thing was. Bizarre.
Well, it sounds like something did answer you. And I oftentimes, it's funny because, and again, like we talk about data, that's important. I mean, this happens not that often. I must tell you, Dean, this is the first time I've heard somebody such as yourself have that experience, though. That was kind of cool. And I'm wondering too, you mentioned like a tree knock, and I had a quick question for you. Do you think that tree knocks are actually the smacking of the mouths?
That is an interesting question. And Sam did chime in even before I asked her to. And she said, note, I have been raised in the woods and on farms. I have never heard this before.
Okay. Hey,
And she
Sam.
hunts like all the time. She's like been hunting since she was a kid.
Yeah.
I mean, she's spent an awful lot of, I didn't see that before I asked her to comment. So thanks for. And she says again, never ever have I heard, never ever heard that ever, or the knock immediately after.
That's what I find intriguing. It answered you.
Weird. And you know what you asked though about, do I think it's doing it with its mouth? I read something weird. I read something strange. It might have been in an Adam Benedict book where he collected, I had him on the Talking Weird years ago, where he collected like monster reports in newspapers from 19th century America. It might be called Monsters in Print or something. It's a great book. I think he's also got Ghosts in Print. I haven't talked to Adam for years, but he was a great guest. But I think one of those stories, and this is before the Sasquatch mania, or before we knew what Bigfoot was from the 19th century, talked about people having an experience, as I recall, with something they were identifying as a gorilla, and it making sounds by beating its chest. And I also wonder, does the knocking sound not tie in with something that might be a physical? And I don't actually think they're physically beating their chests, but you said lip smack, chest beat, tree knock, a weird, just explosive noise. Like, there's these other stories. Paulides talks about people hearing like cages slam when people go missing, or as Doug Hychek and Joshua Cutchin were talking about last night, the weird range of people hearing what sounds like car doors being slammed in the middle of nowhere. Like, what are these explosive weird sounds? And they're explosive, right? They're very quick, or like knock or whatever. What is causing these sounds? I have no idea.
You think maybe that's somebody that walks through a portal? Opening and closing of a portal.
That's interesting.
Especially maybe, I've heard stories of portals that are open in the woods, and they're very hard to detect with the human eye. But if something falls into it or walks through it, it closes up, boom. It's like the portal door gets shut. And you're never to be returned again.
Kasem Lee, who said greetings from Sri Lanka before, said John Keel. John Keel did talk about that car door slamming noise.
Okay.
You're absolutely right. And those portal things, maybe because in the Pleiades sense, maybe that's the sound. It's something opening and, the person's poof, they're gone. Absolutely.
Perhaps. I was even in that little story I told you. I'm even thinking maybe that man kind of got lucky and walked through a portal, was able to find his way out, and was directed out. You just don't know.
You do wonder about people having that. I think was it Jenny Randalls who coined it the Oz factor effect, when everything goes quiet and very strange, and it seems like a glass jar's dropped over the area. Incidentally, Richard Shaver, and I'll talk about this in my presentation, his last encounter with the underground dwellers that he called the Darrow, they were the bad ones.
Yeah.
He said something very similar, that the whole area went quiet. Like there was no noise when he had his last experience with them, when he was abducted and taken to and it sounds very similar to things like the Oz factor effect, to things other people have told. There's other stories. I know Shannon LeGros in some of her, I can't even remember the titles of the books. I haven't talked to her for years, but they're good books with witness reports as well. Talks about people going to these areas and sound seems to change, it doesn't seem to behave the same way. So maybe that sound, as you suggested, maybe that is something indicative of somebody going into a different space where everything changes.
And well, things do change. I mean, even like with me, I mean, from a personal experience, I'm not getting into my encounter, but Dean, when I had that experience and heard that sound and that reverberation that hit me, one of the weirdest things about the entire thing was, as I always paint the picture, of such a beautiful, bright, sunny day. And you can see the beautiful blue water, the green backdrop, this just reddish brown coat on this creature. Then all of a sudden, man, when it emanated that yell at me, and I get hit with that energy or whatever you call it, I was like looking through a filter. Everything got grainy, black and white. I felt like time stood still. It felt like an eternity, but it was only maybe 12 seconds, if that. And I was paralyzed and couldn't move, right? Until I just finally kept just kind of trying to shake my head out of it. Then I snapped out of whatever that was. To this day, I have no idea what that was. And then I went back, got Cindy in the boat, and the rest of the story. But that's why I often wonder, because we all know that creatures like tigers, lions, they can throw infrasound at you and to stun their prey. I guess people, if you get too close in the zoo, if they're behind a cage, they can throw infrasound on you. I've heard stories like that. But this would happen to me with something far more than infrasound. There's something more alien, if you ask me, if I'm being honest.
There's definitely something very strange going on, which I think impacts our senses. And again, why I love fairy faith so very much is that people who were raised in that tradition in Ireland, probably until fairly recently, but certainly 50, 100, 200 years ago, understood that the other crowd essentially worked in manipulation and deception of reality, like what you perceived, what you saw or smelt or experienced or tasted was probably not real. And perhaps this sound thing has something to do with it as well. I don't know. Anyway, I'm not going to keep you too long. I know you've got 100 things to do, and I have to check on my poor little daughter again. You were an incredible guest. I very rarely go over an hour, so it goes to show how much I enjoy.
Oh, well, thank you so much. When I get on a show, and I edited all my stories, by the way, because if I get to talking, I'm very detail oriented, right? So, but anyways, thanks for having me on. I had a great time.
Man, mention some of your books and how people get a hold of them.
Yeah, sure. Well, my books, of course, Bigfoot, Mr. Robertson's True Cryptid Encounters, Book 1 and Book 2. Just type Bigfoot, Mr. Rob in on your Amazon browser. And also, everybody, if you could just subscribe to my channel, if not already, Bigfoot, Mr. Rob on YouTube. That's all it is. I'm on Tuesdays at 9 o'clock at night, Thursdays at 1, Saturday at 11 now, Dean, but that's okay. And 3 nights a week with the Blondes and the Boozer co-hosts with me, and Monica's a co-host. So 3 lovely ladies throughout the week. So we put on great shows with we have interviews much like this with researchers and experiencers. And so it's a fun. We try to make it a variety throughout the week to keep you guys entertained, but also informed. So yeah, and the books again on Amazon. Just type Bigfoot Michigan Rob. And of course, Dean, I can't wait to meet you at the conference, buddy.
Pimp that one more time as well. But by the way, all of these links will be in the show notes for your books, for your show, or your YouTube channel, as well as the conference you're about to talk about one more time.
Excellent. Yeah, the conference, Dean. September 19th and 20th, I'll be meeting you. You're doing a presentation on Shaver Mysteries. I believe that's what you're saying, correct?
And screening the short film, which is
screening the short, man. Everybody, when I'm not just promoting it and selling this, there's going to be so much. We're going to be having all the genres from UFO, alien, cryptid, paranormal, a ghost hunt. We're staying on a ghost property, a haunted property. There's going to be a haunted cars there. Vendors, hey, $75 for a vendor's table. Sell your wares, arts and crafts. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be weird. If you're in small business, bring your stuff. If you're in the Missouri area, because we'll be taking tables. Plenty of openings. Eventbrite.com. It's called the Crossing Realms Conference. Go look on Eventbrite and look it up.
And again, I'll have that link in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining me, Rob. It's always such an amazing time talking to you. I have so much fun.
Oh, I had a great time, Dean, as always.
And until I talk to you again, Rob, which will certainly be at Crossing Realms, and until I talk to everybody else out there, which will be new weird time, Thursday, 9 p.m. Central, but same weird network, the Untold Radio Network, please keep it weird.
Keep it weird.